This is a story of hacking the hackers. Hashcat is used to crack password hashes. I cracked Hashcat. Hashcat reveals secret passwords. They've been hashed. This new code I'm going to introduce today reveals the secrets of Hashcat in order to protect you and your users. For those who don't know me, I'm Sensei. I've been involved with password security for about 20 years. In the late 1990s, I transitioned from physical locksmith work to website security. In the early 2000s, I developed the most used password security system for websites at that time, something called Strongbox. Since then, I've worked in a number of different areas related to IT security. Last year, I turned my attention back to password cracking and strong passwords versus weak passwords. Weak passwords have led to breaches of the U.S. President's Twitter account. Poorly chosen passwords led to the breach of the Canadian Revenue Agency, contributed to the spread of the Purple Fox malware. According to court testimony, a guy by the name of Victor Devers, also known as OX Dude, gained access to the president's Twitter account in 2016 by guessing the password, which was "You're fired." Then, in 2020, 4 years later, the same guy did it again. He guessed the president's password was Maga2020. Took him 5 tries. This is a little scary. Any attacker who guessed Maga2020 ! Would have been able to post as the president. Could have made it look like President Trump said something crazy on Twitter. Granted, that happens sometimes. But this could have escalated international tensions with a message that would have looked like it came from the president. Another attack in 2018, based on guessing weak passwords, targeted several members of the Northern Ireland Parliament. In addition, companies like Alibaba, Dunkin' Donuts, Magentos have all suffered breaches because of weak passwords. According to the Verizon data breach report, up to 80% of data breaches are caused by poorly chosen passwords, including reused passwords. That 80% number may be a little high, but it gives us an idea. Have I Been Pwned catalogs nearly 12 billion leaked passwords and hashes, and over 600 million of those are just plain text passwords. Your password is probably leaked on the web for anyone to download. Matter of fact, I probably have your password. I have a USB stick with 554 million passwords, mostly US people. So if you're in the US, you're an adult, I probably have your password on that USB stick. A lot of times, what's leaked is the hash of the password rather than the plain text passwords themselves. But over 90% of the hashes can be cracked, because existing solutions often result in weak passwords, like Password123, Defcon 2020. Password hashes are cracked by trying common patterns, like city names or other words, and followed by something like a year number. For example, software like Hashcat or John the Ripper can try passwords very, very quickly. For fast hashes, a modern GPU can try up to 9 billion SHA-2 hashes per second. 9 billion tries per second. Look over at hashmob.net. I scrolled through their list of different breaches that they've been cracking. Even here on page number 11, they've cracked 99.77% of the passwords. Because the solutions we have today just cause people to choose really weak passwords. Doing things like capitalizing the first letter doesn't stop the crackers. Hackers can retrieve the hashes if they gain access to a system in a large network, for example. In a Windows environment, the Windows operating system saves a DCC2 hash of every user that logs in, including system administrators. So a system administrator logs into a desktop, a weak hash of their password gets saved on every workstation they log into, and then an attacker can use that system administrator's password to log into potentially every machine on the network. Cracking these hashes by finding the matching passwords can give the attacker just complete control, really, of everything in the company. And at 9 billion tries per second, for many breaches, the crackers have cracked over 99% of them. It's going to be tens of thousands of passwords for a given company or government entity. I submitted a list of 47,000 real user-chosen passwords to HashMob, and the HashMob hackers cracked over 99% of the passwords. So how can we avoid this? It's sometimes proposed that people shouldn't use passwords at all. Well, smart cards and other options do have some benefits. They also have their own problems, so they've not widely replaced passwords in the decades they've been available. They've been available since early 90s, late 80s. We're not using them because they suck in their own way. So for better or worse, passwords are the most common authentication method. Users and IT professionals a lot of times can't replace passwords with something more secure because they're not writing the software that they're using, whether it's ServiceNow or Windows itself, or Cisco routers. They have to use what is, commonly supported by all the different systems, all the different types of software. So we end up using passwords, and that doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon. People suggest rate limiting. Only allow a certain number of tries per minute or per 15 minutes or whatever it is. And while rate limiting does provide a degree of protection from online attacks, it doesn't protect at all when you have people cracking leaked or stolen hashes. And also, rate limiting only provides a moderate degree of protection even from online attacks. For larger organizations, say an organization has 5,000 users, and they use the Windows rate limiting. So Windows is going to allow 5 attempts per account every 15 minutes. So with 5,000 users, that means the attacker can try 25,000 times every 15 minutes. Run a script overnight, they're going to crack, you're going to get in. MFA is mentioned. MFA systems typically, they'll use a 6-digit code, and they suffer from the same type of a problem. Now keep in mind, your standard MFA systems, like TOTP or HOTP based ones, these are Microsoft, this is Google Authenticator, this is MobilePass, any of your common ones, they have to accept at least 3 different codes at any given time, because a clock might be slightly out of sync. So they have to accept the one from 30 seconds ago, they have to accept the one that's current right now, they have to accept the one 30 seconds from now. With only 6 digits, on average, it'll take like 160,000 guesses, just to guess, guessing randomly. Now, if I can try 25,000 attempts every 15 minutes, on average, it's only going to take an hour and a half for me to guess the correct MFA. So I'll just run the script overnight or for a couple hours, and I'm going to get in. So two-factor systems, it's called two-factor for a reason. It's supposed to be a second factor with a strong password. If you don't have a strong password, then adding a really weak 6-digit code, that's not going to solve your problem. Certainly something like Spring 2022, within a couple hours, I'm going to guess the MFA. So what can we do? What about the existing password meters that try to tell you if a password is strong or weak, and maybe try to not even allow people to use passwords? Do they work well? If not, why not? What can we do better? I have a new open source tool and method that I'd like to show you that works actually quite a bit better than what exists currently. There are several existing solutions. They attempt to predict if a password will be easily cracked. Most of them, or some of them, give like a pass-fail answer. Some of them give like a password meter. The problem is they don't actually measure how hard it is to crack. They measure things like, does it have capital and lowercase? Okay, that's nice, but Maga2020 with a capital M is not hard to crack. Right? Your company name and the year, capitalizing the first letter doesn't make it hard to crack. So they're actually measuring the wrong thing. I measured a bunch of these meters to see how well they worked, and I compared the meters to actual password crackers to see which passwords would get cracked by real password crackers. The ones I measured included live PW quality, open password filter, I measured password filtex, password QC for password quality control, and I measured ZXCVBN from Dropbox. Password QC, password quality check, it's notable in particular because it was created by somebody named Solar Designer. This is the same person that created the famous cracking software John the Ripper. Now, as the father of modern password cracking techniques, Solar Designer is an expert on cracking password hashes. So, does that mean his tool for measuring password strength will be effective? I checked to find out. I checked what Password QC said versus what real password crackers were actually able to crack. To measure these, first we need a ground truth of whether each candidate password is actually crackable. So for this, I recruited some of the world's best password crackers to try cracking the password hashes in my data set of real passwords chosen by real users. Each year at Defcon, there's a password cracking contest. Crack me if you can. Each of the last 3 years, Team Hashcat has won. I believe it's now 4 years running, come to think of it. The members of Team Hashcat are therefore arguably the best password crackers in the world. 2 members of Team Hashcat assisted me with understanding how they crack password hashes and measuring which ones are crackable versus which aren't. And then on their advice, I submitted my final corpus of test passwords to HashMob. It's a group of excellent password crackers, so that's what they love doing, is cracking passwords. They share some of the members with Team Hashcat, and they also compete at DEFCON. To get a ground truth of which ones actually get cracked versus which won't, I looked at which passwords actually got cracked by HashMob, which ones actually got cracked by a member of Team Hashcat, and I measured how accurately each password meter or filter predicted the vulnerability of each password. The first password filter or criteria that I looked at is the standard Windows rules. With Windows, passwords have to contain 3 of the following: uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and special characters or punctuation. The password cracker showed me that these rules pretty much just lead to users capitalizing the first letter and add a number or an exclamation point to the end. So this leads to passwords like password 1, spring 2022, or SolarWinds 123, which caused hundreds or thousands of companies to get hacked. These are not strong passwords. They follow all the Windows rules. Overall, looking at the effectiveness of these, I also did compare to, let's just say, a coin flip. So you ask me, hey, is this candidate password strong? I could flip a coin and just randomly say yes or no, and I would be right half the time. We show in this chart, the Windows complexity rule, it only accepted 19% of the actual strong passwords. The passwords that the crackers couldn't crack, 81% of the time, Windows wouldn't accept it. So it actually did worse than just flipping a coin. The Windows rule did block, a number of the weak passwords, but at the cost of also rejecting all the strong passwords. So you could just reject every password and you're kind of like Windows. Live PW quality, ZXCVBN accepted most of the strong passwords, so they allow you to use a strong password, but they also allow you to use all the weak passwords. Live PW quality only rejected 13% of the weak cracked passwords. With some of these, you can tune the filter to accept more or reject more. I did that with ZXCVBN, adjusted it until it was accepting about half of the strong passwords, and it's then rejecting, only half of the weak ones. So pretty much the same as a coin flip almost. This chart of combined accuracy is probably a little bit easier to read. Coin flip is correct 50% of the time. Password QC, correct 56%. The very best is ZXCVBN, which is correct 63% of the time. So it did 13% better than a coin flip. The reason the existing meters don't accurately predict which password candidates will get cracked Might be because none of them attempts to model the cracking process. They look for things like special characters, but an exclamation point or a question mark doesn't stop a cracker. They know that you stick that on the end of your password. So my hypothesis was, in order to determine whether it's a strong password, whether it's likely to get cracked, it would be helpful to model the actual process that crackers use to crack passwords, and then see, will the tools and techniques used by crackers crack the password you're thinking about using? I want my meter to accurately tell people how strong your password is, correctly tell people, will it get cracked, using the methods that are used by the crackers. Fortunately, Team Hashcat and others, they document their process. We can see exactly how they crack the passwords at each of the Crack Me If You Can contests. By understanding how the passwords are actually cracked, can we then determine which ones won't be cracked, which ones are strong passwords. I did some testing to find out. I should mention, it's easy to produce just a random long strings of characters, just random keys that can't be cracked. However, it's going to be awfully hard to remember that. Heck, it'd be hard to type it without making mistakes. So what I'm talking about here in this video is passwords or phrases, things you can remember, you can type probably more or less correctly, but it's not going to get cracked by attackers. So a phrase like Pool 57 belted catching. I can maybe remember that, especially if I start with just the first three parts, and then when it's time to change my password, I add catching on the end. It's a lot easier to remember than just random strings, random characters. Easier to type, but it's not going to get cracked. Even if we look on the homepage for the Hashcat tool itself, it has tutorials on how to crack passwords. And other sites like HashMob have resources, including specific rule files that are used by crackers because they work the best, word lists that work well, and so the crackers use these. I figured if I had a thorough understanding of how the password actually gets cracked, I could perhaps reverse that process and determine if a candidate password is likely to get cracked using these methods. So with everything I could find, I spoke to experts like Chicken Man, Psychotiphonus, and I spent 12 weeks or 14 weeks on Hashcat, HashMob Discord channels, engaging with the top experts to really understand how they do this. To determine whether a password is likely to get cracked, first I needed to verify, is there such a thing as a weak or a strong password? That is to say, will different password crackers crack the same passwords? Will Psychotiphonus crack the same ones that Chicken Man will crack? So I made a measurement of that, and indeed, 95% of those that were cracked by the HashMob folks were also cracked by Chicken Man. So we can say these 95% that were cracked by both sets of tests, these are weak passwords. So how did they do it? The common methods, you start with dictionary text. This is just checking a list of previously found passwords. I've got a list of the top 1,000,000 most commonly used passwords, the top 100 million. If I got your hash, I can, in under a second, check to see whether you used any of the top 1,000,000 passwords, or 100 million, or in fact I've got, as I mentioned, 550 million. Very simple. Next, a rule-based attack just modifies the passwords that have been found before. Things like adding an exclamation point to the end, adding a year number or another number to the end, changing uppercase, lowercase, that type of thing. And then the third major method is what are called masks. This generates defined patterns of letter, number, special character. So, for example, typically people capitalize the first letter, not one in the middle, and they put punctuation at the end. So I can make a mask that says capital letter, 6 lowercase letters, and a punctuation mark. And just check all of those. To invert the dictionary tag, to check to see if a dictionary tag would get your password, it's pretty straightforward. of a list of 134 million is what is normally used by the tool. I have a list of 134 million passwords that are the, quote, most common. I used a special data structure called a Bloom filter to very, very quickly check to see whether the password you're thinking about using is in that dictionary. If it's in there, then the attackers are going to get it because they've got the same dictionary I have. Notice here, you don't have, this is not estimating, right? The other password filters or the meters, they kind of try to estimate the strength based on links, based on uppercase letters, etc. Here we're not estimating. We're saying we know which dictionaries, we know that competent attackers are going to have these dictionaries or ones very similar. If your password's in a dictionary, they're going to get it. Period. You can choose what size dictionary based on how fast the hash is. If you have a very, very fast hash, you can easily check a very large dictionary. If you have a particularly slow hash like bcrypt, maybe you only check the top million or the top 10 million. Rule attack, as I mentioned, it makes modifications to the words in the word list, things like changing uppercase to lowercase, changing 2021 to 2022, that whatever kind of little changes you want to make. Crackers have done significant public research on which rules work the best. So one individual took all these different collections of effective rules and he put them all together into a collection called One Rule to Rule Them All. It's a collection of 28,000 rules, all listed in order of effectiveness because they measured to see which ones are most effective out of other collections of effective ones. So an attacker, a competent attacker who's going to probably run these, effective rules, the ones that actually work well. They might run the top 10,000 or the top 100 of these rules or top 1,000 of these rules, just depending on the speed of the hash. A fast hash, well-researched attacker is going to probably run most of those rules, or very similar ones. So to determine whether your candidate password would be cracked by a rule attack, that's a little bit more complicated. I needed to first figure out which rules would generate your candidate password from a large dictionary. And I actually abused some spell checking tools to do this, to find words in the dictionary or passwords in the dictionary that are similar to the candidate, and then figure out how they're different, figure out what the mask would, or what the rule would need to be, and then check one rule to rule them all. Check this list of 28,000 and figure out, see if that rule is in there. If the rule that matches your candidate password is at the top, it's a rule that crackers are going to use all the time, and you're going to get cracked. If there is no rule that matches your candidate password anywhere in that list of 28,000, it's probably not going to get cracked with a rule attack. And then in between, if the rule is halfway down the list of effective and therefore common rules, then you have a pretty strong password, but it would get potentially cracked if a weak hash is used. For this work, I leveraged RuleGen.py from the PAT toolkit, which is a great toolkit by Peter Kojerski. Mask attack, fairly simple. The cracker generates these masks such as upper, lower, 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 lower special character or upper, lower, 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 lower digit to see if the given password would get cracked using this mask attack. We can simply take the candidate password, here's Sensei 2022, convert that to a mask. We have uppercase letter, several lowercase letters, and then 4 digits. If that mask then is in our list of commonly used masks or effective masks, that tells us, whether or how long it would take for a attacker to run that mask and crack that password. it is looked up in a table that I have of masks that are likely to be tried by attackers in the order that they're most likely to be tried. So things like 4-digit numbers, they're going to be tried very, very, very early because it's very quick and easy for the attacker to do. People do use PIN numbers all the time. So if you have a 4 digits and that's it, we're going to come back saying your password's very weak. If the mask for your password is way down at the bottom of the list, then you've got a stronger password. And to get the actual score of how strong the password is, I did a little math of quadratic regression to look at the number of candidates generated by a mask, and so therefore how long it would take to guess this password with a mask attack. So after implementing all these common attacks, but in reverse, the new system, Password Dog, can calculate how many tries would be needed for each attack to get a particular password. The number needed for the most efficient attack is the number of tries that we report as needed to hit upon that password. So it tells us how long it would take for an attacker to guess the password. We report that number back as powers of 10, so how many zeros are in the number? Here, KD0 is going to be found within a 6-digit number of tries, right? The password 123 likely to be found with 2 to 3 digit number of tries, right? 2 to 3, so 100 tries or so, you're going to get 123. To be considered a strong password, you might say something like 10 to the 14 guesses, or 10 followed by 14 zeros. It takes a 14-digit number of guesses. Maybe that's strong in a particular application. Obviously, it depends on whether you're protecting comments on a news site or you're protecting top secret nuclear codes. Because it works backwards from Hashcat, I call the new tool Password Dog. Hashcat backwards, basically. The new tool was tested by calculating, just as the other tools, calculating how its predictions compare to passwords actually cracked by the real password crackers. Password Dog is significantly better, it turns out, at predicting whether a given password will be cracked. It identified 96% of the strong passwords, 87% of the weak passwords. There's our total accuracy, and this is really the bottom line of this video. The other password meters, they do barely better than flipping a coin. Password Dog, which simulates Hashcat in reverse, it's far more effective, 91.5% total accuracy rate. Also developed this UI to show the user the relative strength of their password as they're typing it. This provides real-time feedback to the user as they type. It's based on the actual time to crack that was calculated by running all these different attack scenarios, but in reverse. And Password Dog also does provide some detailed information behind the scenes about which attack is most efficient, the actual numeric strength rating. If you wanted to use a different UI, that's provided as a JSON, so you can do whatever you want in your JavaScript or programming language of choice. As a companion app, I also developed a tool which suggests strong passwords. But their strong passwords are relatively easy to type and perhaps remember if you need to. This tool pulls words randomly from a list of 30,000 words and also contains numbers and punctuation so that you can be compatible with policies that you may have in your organization, or external applications may say you need to have uppercase, lowercase numbers, whatever it is. The key space for these numbers is 4 times 10 to the 19, so a 19-digit long number, which is rather strong. If you wanted to go stronger, to 24-digit number, 10 to the 24, you could just configure it to add another word if you wanted to. This may look somewhat familiar if you're familiar with Diceware. It's the same concept, although these are quite a bit stronger. They're stronger because they use different forms of the word, whereas Diceware just usually say the dictionary word fish. This tool would say fish, fishing, fished, right, different forms. Here we have Saturdays, plural, right, claims, plural. It also has the different types of punctuation marks, which expand the key space by 4. We have the digits at different positions, which again expands the key space by another 4 times. So these are quite strong passwords. To maybe expand on this work some more, I have been improving the documentation and the packaging, make it easier for you to deploy. You can get it on the GitHub and deploy it. An idea if somebody wanted to play with it would be, if for the rule attack, we don't have a matching rule, but we have a rule that's almost right in our list, that gets almost the right password, then maybe we would score that a little bit differently. Maybe check 2 or 3 different size dictionaries. Right now it's configured you choose what size dictionary that you want to use. I wanted to thank Chicken Man, one of the top experts. He gave me a lot of guidance on this and provided the actual test to see if the password meters were any good, see what the password meters predict, and then see if Chicken Man can crack it. If Chicken Man cannot crack it, then it is a strong password. Or I shouldn't say can't crack, but if he did crack it in the 24 hours or so that he ran his kind of standard attacks. Also, Untitled provided a lot of guidance, and the members of HashMob, who are expert crackers who tried cracking all the candidate passwords. And thanks to my local Defcon group, DC214, who provided excellent feedback on this presentation. You can get Password Dog for free. It's open source software on my GitHub, github.com/sensei-hacker/password-dog. I can be found on Twitter as Sensei Hacker, email sensei@securityguy.dev, or put comments below, and I will put this link in the description below.